When it comes to lost media and the content that surrounds it, I like to go a little beyond what most people see as traditional lost media and focus on merchandise, communities, and culture that have been lost over time. I've talked about this kind of content in some of my older videos that discussed a variety of collectibles that have evaded most public knowledge and become buried online over the years, as well as some old Nintendo fan sites that went defunct when GeoCities was shut down that no one had even looked at in a couple decades. But in both these cases, I would point out that even though the collectibles might not have been documented well, and the fan sites gone from people's memories, the root of these topics are still around today. However, the topic of today's video is something that doesn't really exist anymore, and extends beyond the culture that's been lost, but also to the people who ran and left behind a trail of confusion and mystery that largely remains unsolved to this day. If you've watched some of my older videos on collectibles, you probably have an idea what this topic is about, as it relates closely to that. But if you haven't seen those videos or need a refresher, let me introduce you to a culture that was dead by the mid-2010s. While I don't collect video game memorabilia like I used to, I still enjoy buying a few items here and there. But the majority of my time collecting happened in the late 2000s and early 2010s, and that wasn't a coincidence. Before you could walk into any retail store and find Mario figures hanging on the shelf, you had to largely rely on import shops to provide the merchandise. Import shops, as their name implies, are stores that specialize in getting goods from outside the US, mainly Japan in this case, and selling them directly to US customers. Within the world of collecting, this became an entire subculture as communities shared the best and most notable import shops that were the lifeblood of the hobby back then. This was because there were very few US companies making video game merchandise at the time, and the only way to get those kinds of items was buying them from Japan. But most people couldn't do that themselves, so the shops acted as the middleman. Nowadays, however, there are very few import shops around, mostly for the fact that you can easily import Japanese products yourself through a proxy service, and eBay pretty much killed the small business of import shops. Now, it's not a surprise that plush toys of video game and anime characters are still being made today, and it seems like every month they're coming out with something new. But these aren't being made in the same way they once were. Back in the day, UFO catcher plushes were specialized sets that could only be obtained from claw machines, called UFO catchers in Japan, and weren't available at normal retail. You had to win them from machines if you were in Japan, or buy them from an import shop if you lived outside of Japan. But what's so cool about these sets is how much more defined they were back then than they are today. Oftentimes they'd release alongside new games or new anime arcs. New series announcements would even take up entire homepages of a website, and there was more of a culture surrounding them. You don't really see anyone trying to collect modern-day Naruto plush straps like they did the old sets. I also don't think modern-day plushes have the same amount of charm or details as some of the older UFO plush sets do. Which brings us to the website everyone used as a result of their love for these plushes, but also for how early the site helped the community. There were only a couple websites that I can remember that exclusively carried UFO plushes, since most places had a variety of products. UFOcatcher.net was one of the couple that was only for plushes, and it created an entire community around them. By the time I got into collecting and browsing the internet in general, it was the late 2000s, and this website was only a portion of what it used to be, and now it doesn't even exist. However, the one website that beat UFOcatcher.net for its unbelievable stock and dedication to the collecting community was AnimeMate. If you were doing any plush collecting in the 2000s, you had to have known about AnimeMate, and to this day, I still regard it as one of the greatest collectible websites of all time. Similar to UFOcatcher.net, It only carried plush toys, but unlike UFOcatcher.net, which was actually an import shop based in Seattle, Washington, AnimeMate was based in Japan, so it had access to plush sets that were old, rare, or discontinued. This is where many of the iconic early images of the Sonic the Fighters and Sonic Adventure plush sets came from, as well as the Mario 64 and Sunshine set. It was just a great website even for looking, and it's where myself, as well as a lot of other collectors, first discovered these plushes even existed. If you look through the captures on the Wayback Machine, you can find so much history. You can see when the site restocked on certain items, and how the price changes over the years, as well as new item additions. Unfortunately, as I stated previously, I didn't get into collecting until the late 2000s, so by then, a lot of the higher end items were gone and rarely restocked, which I say as if I could even afford them. But for the most part, AnimeMate's prices were really fair for the time. Specifically, I do recall a Sonic the Fighters Sonic plush for $60 and a Sonic Adventure Sonic for $40. It was a crazy time to be buying plushes for sure, but this was the result of how small the community was at the time. While plush collecting was huge in the late 2000s, the community was never in the mainstream, so in general, the prices were on the lower end. The interesting thing about AnimeMate is that most of their merchandise were old, discontinued UFO plushes you couldn't go win from a catcher anymore, so they largely relied on flea markets and second-hand shops for their stock. It's crazy to even think about finding a Super Sonic Fighters plush anywhere in Japan, much less at a second-hand shop. But they did, and it mattered. Over the years, AnimeMate continued to make a name for themselves in the community, expanded to live auctions through Yahoo Japan and eBay, and upgraded their website a couple times. Even though I followed them for a long time, it wasn't until 2009 when I made my first purchase from them. It was a Sonic the Fighters Sonic keychain for $34, and I still have this exact one to this day. Buying such a rare item from such a well-known store made me feel really good, like I had leveled up as a collector, and after that, I spent a lot of time carefully choosing what else I wanted to buy from the site. For as many high-priced items that AnimeMate had, there were plenty of cheaper ones too. I enjoyed looking through the Pokemon Bandai Friends series, and was planning on getting a few of those at one point. Since they were located in Japan, the shipping was slow and a little expensive, so I had to pick carefully and buy everything all at once. However, for as much time as I spent deciding on what my follow-up purchase to the Sonic keychain would be, that purchase never happened. On March 19th, 2011, AnimeMate would make a post which would be the last to appear on the site, and it was nothing more than a normal stock update. This was the end of AnimeMate as we knew it, but at the time, no one did. It wasn't clear this would be the end, as there was no announcement or notice of discontinuation, and that caused a lot of problems for the site and their customers. Following this update, the site continued to operate with all of its existing stock, as well as popular eBay store that had a feedback score in the 2000s. But unfortunately, while they had all their items still for sale, there was nobody shipping orders. Apparently, that had ended right around the time of their final update, and over the next several years, AnimeMate's reputation would decline, as customers would purchase items but never receive them. This resulted in a lot of angry customers, negative feedback on their eBay profile, and refund requests that were never fulfilled. After several years of this having gone on, it only ended when the domain to the website expired in the mid-2010s. Though I'm not sure what happened to the eBay account specifically, but it seems to be gone too. As someone who followed AnimeMate's updates regularly, it made me feel strange with how they suddenly seemed to disappear, especially since they were so reputable, and pulling off what could be considered a scam at that point doesn't seem like them at all. Something must have happened, and this is where the mystery of AnimeMate really begins, and my attempt to gain some closure about what happened to such an important piece to the old collecting community. Around the time the domain expired and the site went down was also around my earlier days of learning how to research lost media and making contact with the people involved in it. Of course, back then and even nowadays, AnimeMate was archived pretty well on the Wayback Machine, and if you want to look through the site's different iterations over the years, you can, but that's not the goal of this search. I've always wanted to find out what happened to the owners of AnimeMate and ask them about the site's closure, as well as their experience having dealt in that field of business for as long as they did. This search was a little different than most other lost media searches I've done, because unlike those cases where the goal is to find a piece of media, this time I needed to get in touch with real people, so the methods I used were a little different. While I knew for certain they operated out of Japan, I had no idea what their location was or any of the names connected to the site, but most websites would have information like that somewhere on it. This is where I started my search on the Wayback Machine, looking through old captures and trying to find information about the people that ran the store. While I was surprised there were no names listed on the site, I did get some information about its location, which was apparently in Niigata, Japan. For some reason, I always believed the website operated on its own, but apparently it was an extension of a physical store that existed. This would make sense, considering there was a street address and even a telephone number, but the location was all I needed, and began Googling this information, hoping it would pull up some details about the business. And then I got a horrifying surprise. Within the search results, I somehow managed to find articles about a certain event that happened in Japan in March 2011, the Great Tohoku Earthquake. I didn't even realize it when I had looked over the details, but the date of their last update on March 19th and the date of the natural disaster on March 11th are pretty close to each other, so this could have had an influence on AnimeMate. It seemed like too much of a coincidence for the earthquake to have hit a week before the site went silent, so I even pulled up a map of Japan to check where Niigata was in relation to where the earthquake hit. While Niigata is on the opposite side of the country, it was definitely in range to be hit. And considering AnimeMate's abrupt silence, going as far to not even issue refunds for years, when their entire history up to that point had been nothing but perfection, it led me to an unfortunate conclusion. It was entirely possible that at some point between when the earthquake hit and the last update of the site, the people who ran AnimeMate might have been injured, unable to continue running the store, or even died. It seemed like a reasonable conclusion to come to, given all of the evidence, but there was one more thing I had to check before I could believe that's what happened. The capture on the Wayback Machine that had their location listed as Niigata was from one of the earlier iterations of the site, so I needed to see if that information had updated at all, and what a huge surprise I found. Over the course of AnimeMate's existence, they had upgraded their site a few times and made changes here and there, and in 2011, they had been through a couple iterations already. This is the capture I checked to see if it matched up with the previously listed location of Niigata. And it did not. By 2011, AnimeMate had moved locations entirely to Okinawa, which was so far away from the epicenter of the earthquake that they were unaffected. So it doesn't seem likely that the earthquake directly influenced the discontinuation of the business, and the mystery remains. What happened? This is where the research gets a little more interesting, because I started taking a more technical approach rather than looking at primary sources for information. I have never really needed to use one of those website lookup databases for making contacts, but since there weren't any names on AnimeMate's site, I decided it might be worth looking to see if there had been any evidence of a person having registered the domain, and there was. Unfortunately, these websites are no longer operating from when I did my original research, and I only have Discord messages to work with. But the highlight of everything that was there was a name connected to the domain, someone by the name of Marion. This was exactly what I was looking for, and now I could take a more traditional approach to when I make contacts. And this name was so specific, I didn't think there would be any problems finding who I was looking for if they were still online. This search found 3 results that all helped in solving this mystery. The first one was a mention of Marion by name on a Pokemon collecting site, with a user having mentioned they were in talks with Marion from AnimeMate, who was apparently very nice. While this didn't help me find Marion, it completely confirmed they were the same user who registered the domain of the website. However, the other 2 results were a lot more interesting, both being Twitter accounts. The first account was pretty empty, having no profile picture and no specific location other than Japan. But its username was Marion, and it linked AnimeMate along with a description mentioning what they sell. It's definitely the right person, but other than that, there's nothing to see on this account, since it never posted anything either. However, the second account is my favorite find of the entire search, because it reconfirms many of the details I unearthed from previous research. This account is also called Marion, and has a join date of October 2009, which is the same as the other account. However, what's different about this one is that its location is Okinawa, while also linking the AnimeMate website again. It's not clear why they made 2 different accounts at the same time, but this one does have a few posts on it. The first 2 dated 2009, and mention a couple products they were selling, while the final one is really a hidden gem. On March 27, 2011, after having not used the account since 2009, it made a post to an update from the website of an American band called Shinedown, and that's it. It wasn't the March 19th update from the AnimeMate website that was the last we ever heard from them, but rather this tweet from a week later that has nothing to do with plushes or AnimeMate at all, while further proving that nothing bad happened to Marion during the time of the earthquake, resulting in them being hurt, which is a good thing. However, the question that I proposed at the beginning of my search still remains: what happened to AnimeMate? Unfortunately, without being able to contact Marion, I don't have the answer, and can only speculate based on some other evidence I've gathered over the years. I did send tweets to these accounts and never got a response, as well as checked some other social media sites, but never found another profile that I could be sure was the same person. My best guess as to what happened was simply the fact that they gave up the business, and unfortunately, did it in a way that scammed a lot of unknowing collectors. At one point over the years, AnimeMate had posted a message on their site that explained their stock had been drying up and was getting harder to find, which is completely understandable. While competition and reselling didn't really take off until a few years after AnimeMate's demise, most of these plushes are old and hard to find to begin with, and that means supply is limited. Prices were also increasing in the late 2000s compared to what they had been selling for previously, which reduces the amount of potential buyers. I think it would also be fair to say, interest in some of the plushes they sold wasn't really around like it is now. While Sonic collectors have always been in the community, it was more about the Sonic X and Sanai sets back then. Most people weren't aware or didn't really feel the same level of nostalgia for the Adventure and Fighters plushes as they do now. I would still really enjoy a conversation with Marion about what it was like to find and sell some of those really hard to get plushes back then from someone who was more directly involved with it, as well as an official answer on what really happened to the website and eBay store. I still have a hard time believing they would be so careless and leave all their items up intentionally without even issuing refunds, but it seems like that could have been the case when there was no communication. Until we get an answer from the source on what actually happened, AnimeMate will remain a mystery. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to check out some of my other lost media videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, Finn.